Well, I will get started now, and I wanted to thank you first for coming today and welcome you to today's webinar. Good morning and good afternoon, depending upon where you are. Today's webinar is talking about suicide in construction and safe messaging guidelines. I'm Chris Kane, CPWR's Executive Director, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Well, I just looked at the description for this webinar and I just wanted to remind folks we talk about suicide in this context because construction is disproportionately affected by this. Our most recent numbers are over 5,000 construction workers each year die by suicide, and it's something that has really risen to the top of our agenda to figure out ways we can prevent the precursors to the development of conditions that cause people to die by suicide. So that's why we're here. We're also here because September is Suicide Prevention Month. And also the week of September 8th through 12th is specifically Construction Suicide Prevention Week. And so we know a lot of people are thinking about ways that they can observe this, draw attention to it, and talk about this issue. And so today's webinar is really to showcase a resource that's been just published by the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. CIASP is a great partner to CPWR, and I'll tell you another secret in a couple minutes. But really, we think it's important that everybody shows up for these types of conversations, whether it's in a training setting, an intervention setting, when we're talking to the media or anywhere else, that people show up with compassion and the ability to listen. But there's also a few tips that anybody can use that we're going to be talking to today. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's panelists who both played important roles in getting CIASP's safe messaging guidelines published. First of all, Sonia Bowman, sorry,
Okay.
is the executive director of CIASP, and Jessica Bunting is our own research to practice director, but she's also a member of the CISP Board of Trustees. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sonia and Jess, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Jess. Appreciate you having us today and having an opportunity to really have a conversation about this project. My name is Sonia Bowman. I am the Executive Director of the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. My email is there if you would like to reach out after the presentation, and we can help with any resources that we share today. You can also visit us at preventconstructionsuicide.com. Jess, go ahead. So I just want to share a little bit of the background on how we got here and how this document came to be. CIASP really identified a need for more consistency in the conversation around suicide prevention, specifically in the construction space. And what we really wanted to do was empower people to be comfortable talking about suicide and suicide prevention. And so we needed to create something to help that happen, to allow people to use destigmatizing language and to be compassionate and know or feel confident that they're saying the right things, and be able to present a full picture of what suicide in the construction industry is and the contributing factors. Luckily, around that same time, CPWR really wanted to identify good practices for presenting on suicide prevention so that groups would have the ability to have an even bigger impact on people with mental health struggles. Either way, we wanted to do this in a place that would allow both the media, friends, family, and coworkers to have a bit of a guide to have the conversation. So we decided to come up with a safe messaging guideline. And it really took some time for our dedicated education committee to work through putting together the document, then having multiple edits done by our board of trustees and volunteers that support this organization. But we really feel that we've come up with some great best practices to share, and we're excited to be able to present that to you. I do want to take a minute to say thank you to some of the specific individuals who really contributed what we call time and talent to this project. Justin Asbill of the Tribal Group, Jess, of course, from CPWR, Cabri Lehman Schmid from Hensel Phelps, Heath Troyer from Troyer Construction, and of course, Wes Wheeler from the National Electrical Contractors Association. This document will be free through both of our organizations, and you can receive it at cpwr.com or preventconstructionsuicide.com. We are in the midst of a website redo, so if you can't find it there, you can always reach out to us and we'll be able to send that out to you. It is available. You can also find links to be able to access that information on all of our social medias, both LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Our goal was to better prepare you for a discussion around suicide and mental health. But first and foremost, we want to say that this document is a guideline. And while we are all learning the terminology and trying to figure out the best ways to say things, it might feel a little awkward and clunky when you're checking in with a colleague. Just know that being compassionate and being yourself and showing up with empathy will go a long way, and making sure that you're able to have the conversation when you need to do it. So don't beat yourself up if it doesn't go the way that you had planned in your head. There are 4 main sections to this guide and the conversations around it, and they're really going to look different depending on the context. The 3 primary sections are, for one, those that are members of the media and what that conversation looks like, and how we can report on suicide and suicide prevention in a manner that is safe, destigmatizing, but also doesn't sensationalize suicide. The second is for presenters, trainers, and other individuals speaking in group settings. This can be challenging to make sure that you are hitting your mark without using suicide as a way to draw attention to a topic that might be hurtful or harmful in any way. And then there's a section for anyone who's having a one-on-one conversation with someone that they believe is struggling. And finally, we did include a section for the person who is doing the presenting for self-care after some hard conversations, because we can't fill someone else's cup if we haven't filled our own. There are some key tips to any section or any setting, and that's checking in with yourself beforehand, making sure that you are comfortable and that you are in a place that feels right. Are you feeling up to having the conversation? Be yourself, be authentic and come to that conversation with human compassion and empathy, sincerity. You may need to have a different approach each time you have this conversation, especially depending on how or what the person is struggling with. And it's important to be real and listen while you're expressing that support. Validate any problems or challenges the person is facing while providing and maintaining hope. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And even if it doesn't feel that way, you can work through to the other side. Be prepared to assist those who are struggling as they take the first steps to seeking help or additional peer support. Also recognize that this is not a quick conversation, and it may take time to get that person to a place of being willing to accept the help and then walking them through what that support looks like. So make sure that you have prepared yourself and that you exercise self-care in the midst of that conversation as well. And I'm going to turn things over to Jess to walk you through the guide now and to learn more about safe messaging.
Almost forgot to unmute myself. Thanks, Sonia. And as mentioned, I'm Jess Bunting. I'm the Research to Practice Director at CPWR. I'm also on the Board of Trustees for CIASP, and you may be familiar with me as tech support on most of these webinars. So it's my pleasure to be here today in a different capacity and to be presenting to everyone. I am going to talk about a few different sections, the first primary sections before we go back to Sonia. And, as Sonia mentioned, there are those key tips that everyone should keep in mind. So there will be some overlap between sections of the guide. However, when the education committee was developing it, we initially did start it as just one singular set of guidelines. And we really quickly realized that context plays a huge role, and we needed to refine it into multiple sets that were specific to the situation. And so the first set of guidelines pertains specifically to the media. This could be mainstream media, it could be social media, it could be a major news segment, it could be a union magazine, it could be something small and local. The tips apply regardless. And the first thing that we recommend people do, especially if they are not typically writing about mental health or writing about the construction industry, is to familiarize themselves with terminology in both worlds. So we sort of at the same time that this safe messaging guide was being developed, the education committee was working on a glossary of terms that provides clarification both on mental health and construction terminology. Similar to the guide, the glossary is not currently posted on the CIASP website, or as of yesterday, it wasn't, because there's a transition happening. But it will be available soon, and it is currently available by reaching out. Sonia's email is in the slides. My email is in the slides, and so we're happy to connect you with that glossary, and it will be posted shortly. The next step, we recommend just considering the language that is being used. So instead of saying committed suicide, which for a long time was a normal term to use, or something like successful attempt, we recommend saying died by suicide or ended one's life. Individuals who die by suicide are victims just like those who die from injury or illness. And by focusing on what happened to the victim, rather than the action they took, we can change the conversation to reduce stigma and to make it easier for others to ask for help. So the causes here might be a little bit more complicated than somebody dying from a physical injury. They might be harder to understand, harder to empathize with, but that's why using appropriate language that centers what happened rather than the action taken is so important. The other thing, this sort of feeds into why it is really needs to be destigmatized, and why it is so important that we talk about things appropriately, is because it's extremely complex. Suicide does not typically happen because of any singular reason or any singular contributing factor. You need to be aware that the contributing factors are often many, and they're complex in the way that they interact with one another. So avoid oversimplifying suicide deaths by making the audience aware of the many possible contributing factors and the complicated relationships between them. It's typically a combination of external and personal risk factors that are at play, and it's important to acknowledge both. For the media, we recommend avoiding details both about methods and about the individuals themselves. It's natural for people to feel curious, but knowing the specifics of how a person died adds nothing useful to the conversation, and it actually can be an activator for those who are struggling personally or with the loss of a loved one, and can bring up more for them when reading about it. And so it's best to just talk about the impact rather than the methods. Similarly, there's really no reason to identify individuals. It doesn't, again, add much to the conversation. So unless it is explicitly helpful for the safety of others, or if the family actually requests it, we recommend not including that specific information about the individual that would help identify them. The next section that I am going to talk about is the guide for group trainings and discussions. And before I get into this, I just want to quickly acknowledge that we are getting a few reports of audio feedback. I think just a couple of people have said they are hearing an echo. I was not hearing it earlier, but if you are, we do recommend that you either try to log off and reconnect, or you can switch how you're listening. So you can switch from your computer audio to your phone audio by following the directions on your screen and controls. I'm seeing in the chat that someone did log out and reconnect, and it's working now. So that is probably the best recommendation. All right, it's hard being tech support and presenting at the same time. So back to the slides now. Safe messaging around suicide in group trainings and discussions is really for any setting where you're talking to a group. So this could be as an instructor, a trainer, it could be as a presenter. You know, Sonia and I and all of the other CIASP board members are regularly out presenting at conferences. So it could be in that type of role, or it could even be as a peer supporter or peer advocator in a setting where you are not necessarily coming in as the instructor or as the expert, but as a peer. We had a note in the beginning that these guidelines are meant to be used to support other resources. And so again, this is not a standalone list. We anticipate that if you are presenting to a group, you would already have that presentation, you would already have the training that is needed, etc. But we do have some key tips before you go into it and during the presentation. As Sonia mentioned, this is a tip for everyone, but we recommend you do a self-audit before beginning or even before committing to it. And this holds true whether it's your first time talking to a group or your 40th time talking to a group. Evaluate your current capacity to help and support others in this type of context. The next step is to prepare the environment. You don't want anyone to feel like they're in trouble or like they're too overstimulated to listen or talk. So it's important that you create a safe space and arrange the room to encourage a sense of safety and openness, making it easier for people to talk to one another. You can think about the visual and auditory comfort, ensuring that there's good lighting, that it doesn't feel like an interrogation room, that there's comfortable seating, minimal distractions. You can even use calming background music or visuals before and after this session. The other part of making sure it's a safe space is really kind of upfront acknowledging that this is a difficult conversation, that it may be more challenging for some people than others, and it may bring up past or current trauma for those in the audience. We really recommend that you offer the option upfront to leave the room at any time, and to consider having helpers to check in on audience members as needed. Those helpers can be anyone, but they should be individuals that are prepared to have tough conversations and to refer others to help if needed. So at the bottom of this slide is just a little script that you could use to sort of launch into the conversation and just let everyone know, hey, I'm not going to be offended if I see you leave the room. Just give me a thumbs up so I know that you're good. And, if not, one of our helpers will come check on you and make sure that we get everything situated and get you help if needed. Along those lines, you should be prepared to offer support and assistance to any audience members who do need it. Not everyone is equipped to lead a conversation on suicide prevention, and not everyone is equipped to be a helper in the room, and that is absolutely fine. But if you are in one of those positions, you will be looked at as a safe person by those in the audience. And because of that, you just should be prepared for any next steps that need to be taken. You should have some baseline knowledge on how to seek support for suicide prevention and mental health issues such as depression or substance use disorder. Calling 988 is often a really important first step, but if you are working in a local area and you can do a little bit of research ahead of time to see what services are available, that's even better to make sure people get the help that they need in the moment and no one is left hanging. I put a Find Treatment link in here that can be used to locate help more locally. In addition to kind of preparing yourself, preparing the room, preparing your helpers, we recommend also preparing the audience up front by setting ground rules. While audience discussion and sharing of stories can be really beneficial to the group, it is important to avoid delving too deep into those stories or into past or present trauma for a couple of reasons. One being that it can activate feelings in others that no one is necessarily equipped to handle at that time. But also, when you get into a story, often it brings up other stories, and there really is insufficient time or often insufficient professional expertise available to really dig into and address those stories and those traumas at that specific moment. And so you just want to make sure that, you're available or you have resources if people do need to tell their stories after the event or they do need to dig into those things and dissect them. But during the presentation or during the training is not necessarily the time. Finally, the last thing on this slide is that you want to avoid glorifying suicide or presenting it as a viable option. I believe this is in the overall tips for any setting, but it's important to validate what the person is going through and to express compassion without validating suicide as an option. And so instead, we recommend really listening and then focusing on a message of hope. We, again, similar to what we covered in the media guidelines, recommend being comprehensive when talking about the many and complex contributing factors to suicide. And we suggest ending with a call to action if you're presenting in a group or talking in a group setting. You can do personal takeaways where you ask participants to write down one thing they plan to do to support mental health in their workplace or in their personal life. You can also encourage leaders and workers to make a commitment to change, to develop a mental health program in their workplace, to make it a recurring topic at safety meetings. And CIASP actually has a pledge that employers can take on their website. If anyone is interested in really making that commitment to change, we suggest making the pledge and then taking the next step of looking at the resources available to implement a workplace mental health program. And then our last primary section is about safely talking to an individual who might be at risk. So there are a number of trainings like mental health first aid and QPR, question, persuade, refer, which will build knowledge and confidence in how to identify those at risk and have that conversation. And we do encourage those interested in getting that additional training to go through it. I mentioned 2 of them, but there are a bunch of trainings, and honestly, I've heard good things about the majority of them. I do want to say, though, that you don't have to be trained to talk to someone. You know your people better than anyone. So trust your intuition if you feel something is off with a friend or colleague, and don't be afraid of a little awkwardness to have that conversation, and just check in and make sure that they're okay. An important first step when approaching someone for a conversation like this is to consider who you're speaking with. Is it a friend? Is it an employee, an acquaintance? When you're talking to someone you know well, you really can rely on your own best judgment to determine how to approach a conversation. Is it good to infuse some dark humor? Is it good to be really casual and let them come back to you? Don't push them. If it's a friend, you kind of know how to feel those things out. But if you're concerned about someone at work that you may not know as well, it may be more helpful to stick to a script and prepare what you're going to say ahead of time, following methods that are available online, like talking to them, asking if they're okay, providing support and follow-up, which you can learn more about in some of our other webinars. And I think this was also in the main tips that Sonia mentioned, but regardless of who you're talking to, it's really important to bring your authentic human self to the conversation. Even if you are following a script, be sure to present it and approach it with empathy and sincerity. Every person is different and may need a different approach or type of support. So if you show up and you're real and you express hope and you listen to them and what they need, that's really the best you can do. We recommend sharing your story as is appropriate. If you're talking to someone firsthand, this is a little bit different than in a group setting. It can be really helpful to share your message with someone. Just again, keep in mind that it's important to focus on a message of hope. Again, avoid glorifying suicide or presenting it as a viable option. Validate problems and challenges without validating suicide as a legitimate option, and be prepared to assist someone in taking the first steps to seek professional help or support. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Sonia to talk about our last section on post-conversation self-care.
Thanks, Jess. As Jess mentioned, this really can be a heavy conversation. And so we need to make sure that we are checking in with ourselves and checking in on how we're doing after that conversation. Acknowledge your emotions and really just making sure that you feel grounded afterwards, because you could feel worried, stressed, sad, or even guilt about how that conversation went. And as I said earlier, and I know that Jess stressed as we continue the presentation, don't get caught up on what you said. It is really much more important to make sure that you are showing up authentically and compassionately. The words matter for sure. But it's okay. We are all going to make mistakes, and just doing your best and showing up that way will make all of the difference. If you can, debrief with a trusted person, share your experiences, let them know that you went through this experience and what it felt like for you. And it may be that it felt stressful. It may be that you're even proud of what happened, and that's okay to share. While debriefing, though, just make sure you're not sharing details that could breach someone's privacy that you may have supported during that. Engage in some stress relieving activities. Everybody has their own form of self-care. For some, it might be walking or stretching or exercising. For others, it might be journaling or painting or listening to music. Whatever that looks like. For me, it's Snoop Dogg's daily affirmations. For others, it might be classical music. Try deep breathing or meditation, maybe yoga, or other calming techniques for your body. Set boundaries, though, for future conversations. Once you've had that first conversation, recognize what your limits are. Consider what went well and what felt really overwhelming to you. Also recognize when you need to refer, when you are at a place where you are past your emotional limits and what that looks like, but have a plan in mind so that you know how you're going to handle it the next time. If necessary, seek professional help for yourself or counseling. If that conversation is leaving a long-term emotional impact on you, talk to someone who is a professional. 988, as Jess mentioned, is not just for someone who is in crisis. It might be for someone who is with someone in crisis, or it could be for someone who is concerned about someone in crisis, or who just had a conversation with someone who's in crisis. So please recognize that as a tool. There are lots of other warm lines. NAMI has warm lines all across the country that you may be able to reach out to, and be able to talk to someone about what that experience went through, or what that experience was that you just went through. Practice gratitude, a gratitude journal. There's studies that show that showing gratitude allows us to feel more grounded in who we are and really connect to the things that are important to us and strike an emotional balance. Monitor your own mental health for signs of burnout. Schedule some downtime to recharge. Use your vacation time if you've got it. Make sure you're building in some self-care activities. And I think, as we've all mentioned, self-care doesn't have to be that illusion of bonbons and bathtubs, but it really could be just taking a walk in nature or listening to some music. And it doesn't have to be hours at a time. It can be a 5-minute snippet to allow you to just recharge and reconnect with who you are. Educate yourself further on learnings. Read about suicide prevention, active listening, self-care, so that you can build confidence and really reduce the stress of those future conversations. And then, of course, remind yourself that what you did was right and the impact that you had on potentially saving someone's life. Your willingness to listen and offer support likely made a significant difference in somebody's life, and that your empathy and presence were absolutely invaluable. Don't discount that piece. So where do you go for some resources? CIASP at preventconstructionsuicide.com has some great resources. 3 of my favorites that are there is our needs analysis that allows a company to take stock of where they are from a mental health and wellness program, figure out who's responsible for each task and what gaps are created, and then fill those gaps with additional resources on our website. It is in both English and in Spanish. My second favorite resource are our toolbox talks. We have 5 of them. They go with the word stand. And that is S is for safety, T is for training, A is awareness, N is for normalize, and D is for decrease. You can do those all during the Construction Suicide Prevention Week that Chris mentioned earlier. You can do them 1 a week for the entire month of Suicide Prevention Month, or you can do them 1 a week for that time, and then 1 a month maybe for the next 5 months. Whatever really feels like it works best for your business makes sense to be able to share those toolbox talks. And then finally, we also have a free mental health screening. One of the things that I like best about that mental health screening is that it is 100% anonymous and actually has a double layer of anonymity to it. So you go to our website where we don't collect any cookies or any identifying any information. And then you go to another website where this mental health screening is actually hosted. At Connected Minds website, you'll be asked some questions that are not identifying by person, but really allow them to gauge where you are on a mental wellness scale. And then at the end of that screening, it'll give you some keys on findings, whether you are normal or that what you said kind of falls within those normal guidelines and that everything is okay. If there's some concerns, and that you should reach out to your EAP or a mental health provider, or if you're in crisis. And then at the end of that screening, you are able to actually print that out. And there's a QR code that you can take to your doctor, and they'll be able to read those results and move forward with the diagnosis with you as well. So those are 3 of my favorite resources that are on that website. We also have some additional resources available, things like a webinar series. Our next webinar is actually going to be on September 9th, and I will drop a link in the chat for you to be able to sign up for that. It is on loss survivorship. We also have one coming up on the intersection between addiction and suicide prevention. as well as a podcast and some other resources available on that website as well. And then we have a video series that you can also access for some video information on risk factors, an overview on who we are, warning signs, and some other great conversations around suicide and how the conversation should and could happen in a workplace. Jess, I'm going to turn it back to you for some of CPWR's resources now.
Thanks, Sonia. We have a number of resources that I think really complement CIASP's stuff, and actually a few of the resources like our co-branded toolbox talks you will find on both sites. But one thing that we've done is create a whole mental health section on our website, and I will drop the link to that right now. And this houses everything that I'm going to talk about in one place. So if you can't remember anything else, you can just go to cpwr.com/mental health and you'll be able to find everything. We do split the section into two subsections, one that is focused on preventing opioid deaths and one that is focused on preventing suicide deaths. But of course, there's overlap and interplay between those two things. So we hope that you will check both of them out. You will find a bunch of research on our website that, we're the Center for Construction Research and Training. And so this research is meant to inform the industry's mental health efforts as a whole. But then we also take that research and try to move it into practice by developing useful tools and resources. So we have a few studies and reports that are available. We have one on peer advocacy. We have one on reframing primary prevention when it comes to opioids. We have a number of data bulletins and dashboards, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. And we recently completed a few smaller studies, including a report on a bullying survey and 5 small studies that are related to both opioids and suicide prevention, and looking at various contributing factors and the impact on different types of interventions and programs in providing support. I, as I mentioned, wanted to touch a little bit more on our data resources, just because I think they are really helpful in making the initial case as to why this is such an important topic, and how it really disproportionately impacts the construction industry. And so I've linked to our data bulletins page here. And then on the next slide, I've linked to various data dashboards. We have one specifically on mental health, and then we have a construction chart book, which is a collection of various interactive data dashboards. And some of those contain health and mental health related information as well. And then I just wanted to highlight that through those different subsections, you'll find a ton of different training and outreach resources. I mentioned toolbox talks. We have hazard alert cards on suicide and opioids. We have a number of infographics that can be used as posters on the job site or for social media. We have our webinar series that I think we've probably done at least 5 different webinars on mental health prior to this one. We have a couple of training programs. One is an opioid awareness training program. Another is our worker resilience training program, which is meant to build worker resilience and ability to navigate mental health issues. And then we have a physician's alert on opioids, which is meant to be used by workers with their medical providers to have a conversation about what they do, the importance of pain management, and how that can be done without use of opioids being prescribed. With that, I think we have 18 minutes about for questions, so I'll hand it over to Chris.
Great, thank you. Really great information you posted, and we've got a lot of comments in the chat. Wanted to remind folks, if you have questions, we might be able to get to them. I've got a few that were done during registration I'll hit on first. But wanted to also mention, I realized we forgot something in the list, Jess, and that's the newsletter. That's relatively recent, and I'm putting a very long link into the,
I was gonna say, I had
oh,
the thing copied. As soon as you said we missed something, I knew I did forgot.
yeah, and this is something we're putting out about 4 times a year, trying to spread some good news on progress in what good things are happening in the construction industry to address these diseases of despair. You know, there are a lot of good things, and this is actually, I think, our 8th webinar on mental health issues. So we have a whole bunch on our website, all available for free to link to review for folks, and most of them are in English and Spanish. So please, avail yourself of those. Some of the questions we got before with your registrations. The first one is, how do you approach someone who could be facing depression or other mental health issues without violating any HR policy? And I'm going to throw that one at Sonia.
I was trying to make sure I was off mute. That's a great question. I think that when you think about HR policy, what I would say is that this conversation doesn't necessarily fall into that. Being compassionate doesn't have anything to do with human resources policy, so to speak. And my other recommendation is, when looking at policy and figuring out how to create a culture of care or a culture that supports compassion, is thinking about what needs to be taken out of your HR policy, not necessarily what needs to be added into that policy. So making sure that there are no restrictions to having conversations about or helping connect people to the mental health resources that they need. Looking at things like second chance agreements and whether there's viability for that in a conversation, but also not labeling it necessarily as just a second chance agreement, so that if someone comes forward and says, I need help, what does that look like for them? And how is the company able to support what that looks like?
Great, thank you. One of the other questions we had was, what are some steps you can take if someone seems suicidal? What is the best way to approach the conversation? I think we talked a lot about that, but Jess, was there anything you wanted to add?
Now you're on mute.
I must had to find my mute button. I think we really covered it. I'll put a couple links into the chat of some resources that might help people get started on the conversation. But yeah, I mean, I think the basic things are what we talked about: to approach with compassion, but also to come manned with as much knowledge as you're able to, as far as being able to refer someone to other resources.
Great, thank you. This was a great question. How do I know if information or data that I'm sharing or resharing is accurate? We've actually run into this recently, haven't we?
We have.
Where we're trying to correct some information that's widely cited on the internet, and it's absolutely misunderstood information. So it's actually made its way into peer-reviewed publications. So it's a tall task trying to get it corrected. But with that, what are some good sources of accurate and reliable information, Sonia?
Chris, you're right. We have had this certainly come up a few times, and I know it's something that I worry about all of the time when I'm posting for CIASP or when I'm speaking. Is just making sure that the information I'm putting out is accurate information. And honestly, the place I go to is all of you. So CPWR has great resources. That dashboard that Jess talked about really makes it very easy to get the information you need and to be able to use it. When you look at CDC data or SAMHSA data, it's wonderful, but it is complicated, and extrapolating it out to the information that you need is very easily misconstrued, and very easily to not get that math exactly right. So CPWR makes it really easy, and that's often where I go to get the information that I need.
Great, thank you. I
And
see, Jess, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to add real quick that I just put the center to our, the section of our whole data center in the chat, but our director of our data center, Amber Trueblood, also is always willing to work with people on data requests to see if she can answer questions that may not be obviously answered on our website and what's already posted there. So if you have a specific question that's not answered, we may not have the data, but you can always reach out to us. You can reach out via my email and I can put you in touch with Amber.
I've sent many people to Amber and she's been fantastic at getting just that little minute piece of information that you need distilled down. Absolutely great resource. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and just throw out there, you know, it doesn't come from nowhere. I mean, CPWR supports its data center, its research to practice program, and a lot of other these activities through our cooperative agreement with NIOSH. So this is, you know, in the public interest for the public good. Please contact us if we can help you. Next question. So how do you recommend sharing information about Suicide Prevention Awareness Month?
Yeah, I would say the same way you share any kind of information, blast it out on flyers, on workplace emails, put it on your social media. If you don't know what to post on social media, follow CPWR and CIASP and just repost our stuff. Sonia already mentioned and put a link to a webinar that CIASP is doing. I know a lot of organizations will be doing virtual events, and CIASP is participating in a bunch of them for both the week of Construction Suicide Prevention Week and for the full month of September for Suicide Prevention Month. If you have the time, or even if you don't make the time to hold a little stand down on your job site, even if you don't work on a construction job site, even if you're in an office, hold a stand down, hold a meeting that focuses on mental health and suicide prevention, share videos with survivors' stories, share information, send people to training to mark the week or Suicide Prevention Month. Just take action in one way or another to bring the message either to your own employees or to the people you serve. And we are happy to help with that. CISP has a place on their website where you can request a speaker if you want to hold an event, either in person or virtual. CPWR sends folks out as well. You can reach out to me on that if you're looking for somebody to come to your meeting or event. And I see in the chat, somebody just asked if we can confirm which week in September is construction week, and it's what, the second week? I need a calendar.
I believe it's the 8th through the 12th.
The 8th through the 12th, yeah.
Yep, that was a great question. I feel like the next question we really covered well in the discussion. One question came in both in the chat and on the Q&A that I wanted just to hit on. You know, the reasons why the construction industry is one of the highest rates of suicide. You know, we have a lot of working hypotheses and there's a lot of peer-reviewed literature on this. I'll get a particular analysis that is available for free that kind of looks at all of the research done up until that date on construction worker suicide and identifies factors related to the individual, related to the workplace, and other conditions. And it really gives us at CPWR kind of a way to focus our efforts where we belong is in the workplace issue and how to improve working conditions for construction workers, not necessarily in the psychology realm as much, but more about like what can we do to change construction work that that will make a difference in the long run. And we've got a lot of opinions about that, and we're doing research on that now. So we'll make sure to include some of that in the follow-up. There was one question that popped in, and I don't know if you women are prepared to answer this one. are there any videos or resources that actually demonstrate people having the uncomfortable conversations? Because we have a lot of printed material, and I truthfully don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I don't know if either of you do, Sonia or Jess.
It's a great question. I will say that I don't think they demonstrate it fully, but they walk through how to do it. You can actually take Living Work Start training on our website for free, and they walk you through the process of having that uncomfortable conversation. I don't know that there's a video that kind of lays it out simply because it's so nuanced, but there is a step-by-step on Living Work Start training, which you can request a free license for on our website.
I'm just reading some of the questions on the chat, and it's mentioning some peer support programs in the building trades unions that we're familiar with and think the world of. We've done some studying of the peer reviewed, of peer support programs, and we can make sure we include some of those reports in the follow-up email. I think the last question I would like to throw out there is, what are the trends? You know, we had several data questions come in with the registration process, but is there any kind of summary that we can make as far as what's happening over time with construction worker suicide?
In a perfect world, I'd love to say that the trend is that the number's going down, but right now it's not. And so just like we focused on OSHA's Focus 4, and with time and conversation and education, we were able to lower those numbers. The same thing that has to happen with construction suicide prevention as well. I mean, it's Safe and Sound Week, right? And so think about what that number 5 should be. And is that mental health? And how do you integrate those conversations so that they are just as much of your safety plan and your safety conversations as struck bys or falls or electrocution conversations.
Thank you, Sonia. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I really appreciate the comments coming in and the feedback we got both before and after or during the program. Keep an eye out for the follow-up email, and I wish you all a wonderful rest of the day, and thank you for participating with us today. Bye-bye.
Thank you.